Las Vegas is one of those places that makes absolutely no sense the more you think about it. You can drink a margarita at 9 a.m. while standing next to the Eiffel Tower, walk 50 feet, and you're inside a glowing Egyptian pyramid, turn the corner, and suddenly you're riding a roller coaster through the New York skyline. And all of this, it's happening in the middle of the desert that, by the way, was never really designed for humans to thrive in the first place. Which raises an important question. Who looked at the Mojave Desert and thought, you know what this needs? Neon. Perhaps a volcano. And several $1 billion worth of bad decisions. Because that's really what Las Vegas is when you strip away the spectacle. It's not just a city, it's one big contradiction. Las Vegas has no logical reason to thrive the way that it does. It should not survive 110-degree summers, it shouldn't attract millions of people a year, and it definitely shouldn't keep reinventing itself every few decades. And yet, here we are. Hey everyone, welcome back to Pretty Strange, the podcast where we deep dive into history, mystery, and the kind of stories that make you go, wait, that actually happened? I'm Taylor, your host, and today we're talking about the dry, glowing, slightly unhinged miracle that is Las Vegas, Nevada. If you stand in modern Las Vegas, it feels almost impossible to imagine anything else ever being there. The Strip and all the lights feel so permanent, and the casinos feel like they've been there forever. But way before the neon, the gambling, before Elvis, before any of it, it was just the Mojave Desert, a place where, on paper, human settlement just really didn't make any sense. But here's the twist. Underneath all that emptiness was water. Like, literally. Not obvious water, not like lakes or rivers, but hidden water. Underground springs fed by aquifers that created small pockets of life in an otherwise unforgiving landscape. And in the desert, water isn't just useful, it's everything. It's survival, it's movement, it's trade, it's literally life itself. That's why the earliest known people in this region, the Southern Paiutes, they didn't see an empty wasteland, they just saw a living map. A system of water routes, seasonal movement, food sources, and sacred places that only made sense if you understood the land deeply enough to read it. To outsiders, the Mojave just looked empty. Trade routes eventually formed across this wider region, connecting what we now call Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and California. Goods like turquoise, shells, obsidian, and woven goods moved through these deserts way before Vegas was even a thought. And for a long time, the Las Vegas Valley itself wasn't even the main event. It was just there. It was a stop, a pause, a place to survive the journey. Until someone on a trade route in the 1800s came across it and realized something important. This wasn't just empty land with a spring. This was a lifeline. That someone was Mexican scout and trader Rafael Rivera, who came across the valley while searching for water. When he saw the springs and the green meadows, he reportedly named this place Las Vegas, which translates to the meadows. So, for a long time, Las Vegas wasn't really a city. It was more like a pit stop, a place you just passed through, mostly because you had to, which honestly is kind of wild when you think about what it becomes later. In the early 1900s, the American West was expanding fast. Railroads were racing across the desert trying to connect California to the rest of the country, and they needed a reliable midpoint, a place where the trains could refuel, where workers could rest, and where supplies could be stored. But most importantly, in a region like Nevada, they needed a place with water. Steam engines don't really function on vibes alone. In 1905, the railroad auctioned off land around the tracks, giving people the opportunity to create something a little more permanent. And just like that, Las Vegas was created. Not discovered or founded in some noble, heroic way, just mapped up, divided, and sold off. Kind of on brand, honestly. May 15th, 1905. That's considered the city's birthday. And if you were standing there at the time, you would not be thinking that this is going to be the future entertainment capital of the world. Because early Vegas was rough. Wooden buildings, tents, dirt streets, boarding houses, saloons. It wasn't glamorous or stable. It was just functional. And it only existed because the railroad had needs. But here's the thing about railroad towns in the American West. They don't stay quiet for long. Wherever the train stopped, people followed. Workers came in looking for jobs. Miners passed through heading north toward Nevada's gold and silver country, and ranchers supplied cattle to keep everything running. Immigrants from Europe, Mexico, and Asia arrived looking for opportunity in a place where nobody really cared who you were yet. Slowly, something started to form. Not a tourist destination or a fantasy land, just a working town trying to figure itself out. And like a lot of early Western towns, Las Vegas developed a certain attitude. Because when you build a place around transient workers, rail traffic, and people passing through, you don't really get settled suburban calm. You get saloons, gambling rooms, late night entertainment, if you know what I mean. You get a culture where rules are flexible. Las Vegas didn't invent that energy, but they definitely embraced it and then amplified it. By the time the town was officially incorporated in 1911, it was still small, but it had something important. It was no longer temporary. This might be the real turning point because once a place stops being just a stop, it starts becoming a place where people can imagine a future. And Las Vegas was about to get its first real test of whether it deserved one. But nobody could have predicted what was coming next. A few decades later, a massive government project 30 miles away would accidentally turn this dusty railroad town into something much bigger, something faster, looser, and a lot more profitable. And that's where Las Vegas stops being a town and starts becoming a machine. For a while, Las Vegas was just there, small, quiet, still figuring itself out. Then the 1930s show up. The Great Depression hits the United States, and suddenly the entire country is scrambling for work, money, and anything that looks remotely stable. Just 30 miles away in this sleepy desert town, one of the biggest construction projects in American history is about to begin. The Hoover Dam. Now, originally it was called the Boulder Dam, but the job stayed the same. Tame the Colorado River. Control the flooding, generate electricity, and supply water to the rapidly growing Southwest. It was ambitious in that very early 20th century way, where they're like, if we could just build something big enough, we can force nature to cooperate. And to do that, they needed one thing more than anything else: people. Thousands of them. So suddenly, the desert starts filling up with all these workers, men traveling alone looking for any kind of paycheck, families following jobs because there weren't many other options, entire temporary camps popping up almost overnight, and right in the middle of all of this movement, Las Vegas is just sitting there, like, wait, why is everyone here now? To accommodate the dam workers flooding into the area, the federal government built Boulder City. It was strict, controlled, almost no fun allowed. No gambling, no alcohol, no chaos. Basically, it's the exact opposite of what humans tend to want after building a giant concrete wall in the desert all day. So what do people do? They go to Las Vegas because Vegas was close enough to reach easily and loose enough to offer everything Boulder City didn't. Drinks, gambling, music, late nights, a place to disappear for a few hours and feel like a person again. And just like that, Las Vegas accidentally became the pressure release valve for one of the biggest construction projects in the country. Money starts flowing in, workers come in with paychecks and nowhere else to spend them. Bars start doing well, like really well. Small gambling halls start popping up, and for the first time, Las Vegas realizes something important. People don't just pass through here anymore. They come here on purpose. In 1931, everything shifted again. Nevada legalized wide-open gambling. Now, this wasn't some glamorous marketing decision. There was no welcome to fabulous Las Vegas energy yet. It was purely for survival. The state was broke. Like, broke. The Depression had gutted the economy, and lawmakers basically looked around and said, might as well try gambling. So they made it legal. And that decision changed everything, because now Las Vegas wasn't just convenient, it was officially allowed. Within months, small casinos and gambling rooms started popping up all along Fremont Street, but it was nothing like we think of today. There were no fancy hotels, no street performers or live music, Just smoky rooms, card tables, neon signs slowly starting to glow in the dark, like the city is just learning how to turn itself on. Places like the Northern Club became some of the first licensed gambling establishments, and Fremont Street became the center of everything. Almost overnight, Las Vegas started developing a whole new identity. No longer just a railroad stop or a government outpost, but something looser, something faster. A place where people could come and take a break from reality. And then, something even bigger happens. The Hoover Dam finishes in 1936, and it doesn't just bring electricity and water, it brings permanence. Las Vegas now has power. No, like literally, like stable electricity. And that changes what can be built, what can be imagined, and how far the city can actually go. But more importantly, it changed the mindset. Because once people realize this desert can be controlled, lit up, cooled down, sustained, it stops being just empty land and becomes full of opportunity. And opportunity in Las Vegas always has a way of attracting attention. The kind of attention that doesn't stay quiet for long. This is where things start getting interesting. Because once the money shows up and the gambling becomes legal, the workers arrive with cash burning holes in their pockets. Las Vegas stops being just a town that entertains people as they pass through. It starts becoming a place where people come to make something happen. Sometimes legally, and sometimes not. That's where the next era begins. The one where Las Vegas gets its most infamous reputation. The one where the city learns what it really looks like when power, money, and risk all decide to move into the same neighborhood. Yes, I'm talking about the mob era. By the time the 1940s roll in, Las Vegas is no longer a secret. It's not huge yet, but it's loud enough to get noticed. Gambling is legal, tourism is growing, money is starting to circulate through the desert in a way that feels fast. And whenever money starts moving that quickly in places with not a lot of oversight, certain people tend to show up. Organized crime didn't create Las Vegas, but they absolutely recognized it. Because casinos, especially in their early form, are perfect businesses for people who understand cash flow, risk, and how to keep things untraceable. There was a lot of money coming in and going out, and not a lot of questions were being asked. Mob influence starts slipping into the city quietly at first. Not in some dramatic takeover moment, but more like little investments, front companies, hidden partnerships, names that appear on paperwork but not on the stage. Groups from Chicago, New York, Cleveland, Kansas City, they all start seeing the same thing. Las Vegas is a place where the rules are still being written, and that's an opportunity. One of the earliest major turning points comes in 1946 with the opening of the Flamingo Hotel. This is where things start to shift from just a gambling town to full-on fantasy city. The Flamingo wasn't just a casino, it was an experiment, a version of what Las Vegas could become. And the man most associated with it is Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Siegel was charismatic, violent, and deeply embedded in East Coast organized crime networks. He also had something that mob figures didn't really have at the time, a sense of spectacle, a sense of whimsy, if you will. He didn't want just a gambling hall. He wanted luxury. He wanted eleganza. He wanted something that looked like Hollywood had collided with a desert hallucination. The Flamingo was designed to feel different from anything else downtown. Upscale rooms, fine dining, entertainment, a resort atmosphere instead of just gambling tables. In a lot of ways, this is where modern Las Vegas begins. But behind the scenes, it's chaos. Construction costs spiral far beyond expectations. Money disappears, budgets collapse, delays stack up. And in the world Bugsy Siegel was operating in, that kind of financial failure wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. The Flamingo eventually opens in 1946, but it struggles. And in 1947, Bugsy Siegel is murdered. Officially, the reasons are complicated. Unofficially, it's believed to be the result of mob anger over the Flamingo's financial collapse. But here's the twist. Even though Siegel dies, the idea he pushed forward survives because the Flamingo proved something important. Las Vegas can be more than a stopover gambling town. It can be a destination. And once that idea takes hold, it spreads fast. Over the next decades, casinos like the Sands, Stardust, Desert Inn, and Dunes rise up across the Strip. And behind many of them, the mob influence continues. Not always visible or direct, but present. Money flows in from different cities. Operations get structured in a way that allows profits to be adjusted before reporting, and that money is funneled through networks that stretch far beyond Nevada. It wasn't just local crime. It became a national system quietly feeding into Las Vegas. And while all that was happening behind closed doors, the public version of Vegas was becoming something very different. Something smooth, stylish, glamorous. Enter the Rat Pack. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and others turned Las Vegas into a cultural icon. Their shows at places like the Sands weren't just performances, they were full-on events. A mix of music, comedy, improv, drinking, and big celebrity energy was effortlessly cool. This is the Vegas most people remember. Neon lights reflecting off of black cars, smoke-filled rooms with tuxedos and champagne, and that's the duality of this era. Because while Vegas is selling glamour to the world, there's always something darker humming underneath. Investigations began to circle organized crime activity and federal pressure increased. Wiretaps, informants, and legal crackdowns started exposing how deeply some operations were entangled with the mob financing and influence. Slowly, the foundation began to shift. By the late 1970s and into the 80s, the mob era had started to fade. Corporations had stepped in and regulations tightened. Casino ownership became more public, more structured, more corporate. That mob influence in the shadows didn't disappear overnight, but the control did. And what replaces it is something entirely new, something bigger, brighter, and arguably even more surreal. Because if Mob Vegas was about risk and hidden power, what comes next is about scale. Massive scale. Vegas doesn't get less strange, it just gets more polished. And that's where the next version of the city begins. The one where Las Vegas stopped being a secret and starts becoming a global fantasy built in real time. The neon fantasy era. By the time the 1980s arrive, Las Vegas is at another turning point. The mob era is fading, corporations are moving in, and in true diva fashion, the city is about to reinvent herself. Again. But that's what Vegas does. It doesn't really change, it just rebrands reality. And this time, the new vision is simple. If people are coming to escape real life, then why not build an entirely different one? So Las Vegas stopped being a gambling city and started becoming a fantasy city. Not metaphorically, literally. The Strip had become a stretch of impossible architecture. Places designed not just to be visited, but to be experienced. At this point, you don't just walk through Vegas anymore. You move through worlds. One minute, you're under a glowing Egyptian pyramid at the Luxor. Next, you're in medieval Europe at Excalibur. And a few steps later, you're looking at a replica of the New York skyline with a roller coaster screaming overhead. And that was the point. Vegas stopped trying to look real, and it tried to look better than real. The entire city becomes a curated illusion. No clocks, no windows, just constant flashing lights, sound, everything designed to blur time so you forget where you are, what hour it is, and maybe even what day it is. Because the longer you stay in that feeling, the more likely you are to keep playing, eating, drinking, and spending. Vegas isn't just entertainment. It's now full-on immersion. And in the 90s, that immersion gets even more theatrical. Casino executives realize something important. Gambling alone isn't enough anymore. People want spectacle. So Vegas gets bigger, louder, more unbelievable. Casino execs wanted more than gambling. They wanted families, tourists, and people who might never even step foot into the casino at all. That meant bigger productions, bigger stages, and even bigger personalities. Enter Cirque du Soleil. Shows like O, Mystere, and Ka turn live performance into something between theater, acrobatics, and dream logic. You're watching people defy gravity in real time. Another one of the most iconic acts of the era was Siegfried and Roy. Their White Tiger performances, The Mirage, became a symbol of 90s Vegas excess. Impossible illusions, exotic animals, a giant theater, and a sense that the city would always try to outdo itself. Vegas was in its family-friendly era. One of my, if not my favorite movies of all time is Vegas Vacation. Is that a hot take? I don't know, but I love 90s Vegas, and when Clark Griswold brings his family here, their adventure perfectly illustrates the multiple personalities of the city. Clark is the classic gambler, losing it all in the enticing casinos. Ellen loves the celebrity spectacle of it all and even gets to rub elbows with Mr. Vegas himself, Wayne Newton. Audrey gets a taste of the showgirl nightlife, and Russ, aka Nick Papagiorgio, has luck on his side and gets to experience Vegas like a high roller with some questionable characters from the casino tables. Same vacation, very different experiences. And that's the thing, that could actually happen if you went there with your family. Take an alone day and you could experience any one of these worlds. You could do whatever you wanted. In the 90s, it felt like anything was possible. What comes next is an idea that changes everything again. The residency revamp. For a long time, Vegas was where performers went when touring slowed down, a kind of final chapter in their career. But that changed when major artists started to realize something. Why travel to audiences when the audiences could come to you? Elvis Presley had helped plant that idea decades earlier, but in modern Vegas, Celine Dion turned this into the blueprint. Her residency at New Day at Caesars Palace in 2003 wasn't just a show. It was a reinvention of what Vegas entertainment even meant. It was a huge production with high emotion, massive scale, and suddenly, Vegas residencies are no longer career endings. They're status symbols. Then the list grows. Britney Spears, Lady Gaga, Usher, Bruno Mars, Adele. Vegas becomes a place where the biggest artists in the world don't just pass through, they stay. They get to perform on their own terms. Well, except Britney, but that's a whole separate episode. I can't even get into it now. Meanwhile, the Strip itself evolves again. The themed chaos of the 90s slowly gives way to something more polished, more expensive and controlled. Mega resorts like Bellagio, Wynn, and Aria shift the focus from fantasy world to luxury experience. Fine dining, designer shopping, nightclubs. Vegas becomes less about escaping into another world and more about escaping into a different version of you. A version that spends money differently. Why pay rent when you can buy a bottle at the club, am I right? But underneath all of it, the same core idea never changed. Las Vegas is still a place built on illusion, but now the illusion is smoother, cleaner, more intentional. Because whether it's a fake Eiffel Tower, a neon pyramid, or a perfectly engineered luxury suite overlooking a desert that shouldn't support any of this, the goal is always the same. The goal is to make you forget where you are and make you want to stay a little longer. But Vegas isn't finished. Is it ever? Every few years, people look at the city and say, this is peak. And Vegas, as if it hears that, immediately starts planning what comes next. And that brings us to the modern era, where Las Vegas stops being just a destination for gambling or shows and becomes something closer to a living entertainment machine. Every few years, people declare Las Vegas dead. They said it after the mob era ended. They said it after the family-friendly Vegas experiment faded. They said it after the 2008 recession, and they said it again during the 2020 panini. But Las Vegas keeps proving the same thing. It adapts way faster than people expect. What's happening now is just the latest reinvention. Because the real secret of this city is not that it's unstoppable. It's that it's flexible. It doesn't cling to one identity. It cycles through them, like costumes. And the newest costume? Sports. Just like that pick-me girlfriend at the tailgate. For decades, major leagues avoided Vegas entirely. Too much gambling, too much risk, too unpredictable. It was the one place in America where professional sports did not want to set up shop. And then, slowly, that changed. First came the Vegas Golden Knights in the NHL, a brand new team in a brand new market that immediately starts winning like it has something to prove. Suddenly, hockey in the desert doesn't feel like a joke. Then come the Las Vegas Raiders, relocating from Oakland and bringing NFL football straight to the Strip. A massive team with a massive following dropped into the city that's built on spectacle. Then everything accelerates. UFC turns Las Vegas into its unofficial headquarters. Formula One arrives and turns the Strip into a nighttime racetrack where the entire city becomes the stage. Even baseball enters the conversation, with new stadium plans signaling that Vegas isn't just a stop for entertainment anymore. It's becoming a permanent sports capital. That shift matters because sports don't just bring tourists, they bring identity, they bring loyalty, they bring the idea that people can belong here. They don't just have to pass through. At the same time, Vegas tourism is evolving again. It's no longer just about gambling or shows or the nightlife. Now it's about experiences. Luxury resorts keep expanding, technology integrates deeper into everything. Immersive entertainment, AI-driven attractions, massive conventions, influencer tourism, esports events. Vegas is becoming less of a city and more of an entertainment operating system. And the Strip keeps doing what it does best, turning excess into architecture. But underneath it all, something familiar is still there. The same logic that powered every earlier version of the city. If people want escape, build them a better version of reality. A more exciting one, a louder one, a shinier one. And if it stops working, change it, replace it, rebuild it. That's the cycle. And that's why Las Vegas never really ends. It just pivots. Again, again, and again. From oasis to railroad stop, to mob playground, to neon fantasy, to global entertainment machine. It keeps updating and refuses to stay still long enough to become outdated. And somehow, that works. And that is the story of Las Vegas, a city built around a spring in the desert that somehow became one of the most recognizable places on Earth. A place where mobsters became legends, neon became architecture, and millions of people willingly fly into the middle of nowhere every year to lose money and call it a vacation. Whether you see Vegas as a glittering oasis, a cautionary tale, or just a very expensive place to buy a bottle of water, one thing is certain: there's nowhere else quite like it. Thank you for spending time with me today here on Pretty Strange. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a rating. If there's a strange history, mystery, oddity, or cultural phenomenon you would like me to cover next, let me know. I'm always looking for new things to become unnecessarily obsessed with. Until next time, stay curious and question everything. See you in the next one.